Tesla survived cholera, believed in aliens on Mars, invented a death ray, and jumped from his roof to fly. But was he a cool guy? For measure of coolness, we're gonna look at 3 things in this video. Being a good person, like valuing the common good over his own wealth, doing something genuinely impressive, like inventing electricity, or doing something more traditionally cool, like a kickflip. Some very short backstory on Tesla. He was born on July 10th of 1856 in Smiljan, a tiny village in what is today Croatia, but was back then part of the Austrian Empire. His papa was a priest and his mother couldn't read, but still memorized some epic Serbian poems and part of the Bible. They weren't exactly rich, but definitely part of the educated aristocracy with multiple horses and even servants. So I'm gonna put that down as Nepo baby. As mentioned in the intro, as a child he built himself a parasol and jumped off the roof of their barn. This almost killed him, and you definitely shouldn't try this at home, but it's also definitely going into the cool column. He also continued to do stuff like this, if maybe a bit more calculated. He would hold lectures about his research and drew huge crowds, because during these lectures he would electrify himself. Anyway, back to his childhood. He finished school a year early, the fucking nerd, then contracted cholera and used this to guilt his father into letting him study engineering instead of becoming a priest. Life pro tip, if you want something from your father, just contract a deadly disease. He then goes to university where he learns 9 languages, at which point he gets bored and starts gambling. He loses all his money and can't pay the tuition, so he asks his family for more and he uses that to, you guessed it, gamble more. And wouldn't you know it, he wins back all the money he lost. Get it twisted, kids. Gambling always works out in the end. Except because he was gambling all the time, he didn't study for his exams and failed them all. He didn't want to tell his family this, so he ran away, and for a while they believed he drowned in the nearby river. He never returned and thus never graduated. Eventually his family did figure out he's still alive though. He worked odd jobs in Slovenia, Czechia and Hungary, all the while obsessing about AC or alternating current. You see, in university he saw a DC commutator in class. What is that? Well, apparently electricity always changes directions, and this is bad. We wanted to not do that. And so for a while we used commutators that would make the electricity go only in one direction. It was pretty inefficient and sparked a lot. Tesla saw this and instantly was like, that shit's dumb, yo, I can do it better. For which his teacher not only corrected him, but ridiculed him in front of the whole class, so naturally Tesla obsessed about it for the next several years. And then he solved it. And now we have refrigerators and smartphones and also social media, but I guess they can't all be winners. Most of you have probably heard that Thomas Edison electrocuted an elephant to show how dangerous Tesla's alternating current was. But you heard wrong. Topsy the elephant was electrocuted, but Edison had nothing to do with it, and the war over AC and DC was over at this point. Anyway, back to Tesla. Did you know that he worked for Edison for a while? First for Edison's company Edison Continental in Europe, and then when he moved to the US, he met Edison and continued working for his company. But then of course, they had a falling out over the whole AC-DC thing, and Tesla started his own company. But working for Edison was how Tesla got to the US in the first place. And after arriving in New York, his first impression was that it was uncivilized and 100 years behind the lifestyle of the great European cities. He also apparently was a good pool player, but often kept that hidden to hustle Americans out of their money. What a cool guy. But in true American fashion, he also believed that he could end all wars if he just invented a big enough gun. He conceived of a death ray that would shoot lightning from the sky and a quasi-intelligent missile guidance system with great range and unerring precision. None of that worked out though. He also worked on wireless communication and thought that if we could all just talk to each other instantly all the time, surely that would lead to world peace. Because even though he worked on missile guidance systems and death rays, he was kind of a hippie. All the way back in the 1800s, he was already concerned about the Earth's ecosystem and the finite supply of fossil fuels. He wanted to harness wind, solar and geothermal power and invested in and built the turbines that harness power from the Niagara Falls. According to him, all this power should be used so people could spend less time working and more time on creative endeavors. He would also befriend pigeons and fed them regularly from his windows. Alright, let's talk about his bad sides. Tesla was a megalomaniac, and this led to a lot of his projects being unfinished. He, for example, invented a method to wirelessly transmit messages, and he needed investors for it. But instead of asking for a modest sum to prove he could transmit messages over a short distance, he wanted to set up worldwide communications right away. Other projects that were basically ready to be sold, like fluorescent lights, he just stopped working on in favor of grander projects, most of which would result in world peace according to him. In interviews, he frequently said that he could create rain in the desert or contact other planets. He also believed that he did contact aliens on Mars, and he wanted to believe this so much that he disregarded all evidence to the contrary. To make the mad scientist formula complete, he also told a reporter that he could split the earth and put an end to mankind with an oscillator he had invented. Honestly, I kind of feel like that one should go into the cool column. Another one of his not so good habits was living beyond his means and not paying his debts, even to his friends. Tesla wasn't a very good businessman, and not finishing his projects didn't help. If you thought this was a time period where man acted with honor, reading Tesla's biography will quickly convince you of the opposite. So many patents were ignored, original inventors discredited, whole companies were built on stolen knowledge because litigation took so long and the profits were so large, as long as you stole the right patent, it just didn't matter. All of this meant that, even though he invented some of the most important technologies of the time, he often didn't have much money. But he still lived as if he did. For 20 years he lived in the then tallest hotel in the world, the Wall of Astoria, which of course wasn't exactly cheap. In that time he often didn't pay his rent and mostly lived on credit, which is also why he moved out in the end. Through today's lens, Tesla was anti-Semitic. He wasn't an active anti-Semite, he didn't write pamphlets or anything, and had no problem working with Jewish colleagues, but through his written correspondence, it is clear that he believed in and regurgitated anti-Semitic stereotypes. This is also supported by the company he kept, which we'll get into in a bit. Alright, let's get back to the fun stuff, like the Hindenburg. Yes, the giant airship that blew up in 1937. I'm now realizing that fun stuff maybe wasn't the best choice of words, but did you know that the Hindenburg crash wasn't even the worst airship catastrophe? It only ranks at number 4. And I always thought hundreds of people died with how well known the incident is. Turns out 36. Still a tragedy, of course, but even the number 1 disaster, the USS Akron with 73 deaths, pales in comparison to some of the worst plane crashes. Which brings us back to Tesla. To say he was involved in the Hindenburg is overstating it, but he did give a speech where he said that airships are far superior to planes, because they're just better, faster, and safer. He was also a big proponent of using helium to fill the hull instead of hydrogen. Hydrogen being of course highly flammable and helium being highly not. And maybe if the engineers had used helium, the Hindenburg crash wouldn't have cost so many lives. Tesla was pretty famous, and one thing famous people do better than most is meeting other famous people. He met Heinrich Hertz, discoverer of Hertz waves, Ernst Mach, inventor of Mach speed, JP Morgan, but also writers like Mark Twain and even presidents like Teddy Roosevelt. But he also had ties to more questionable characters like Titus the Bobula, a staunchly anti-Semitic arms dealer who was arrested for a coup plot in Hungary. He was also on friendly terms and would often meet with the poet George Sylvester Viereck, who was a German propagandist during World War I and a Nazi spokesman during World War II. Tesla also once held a lecture for a group called Friends of Soviet Russia, for which the FBI promptly investigated him. In terms of inventions, we of course have AC, but Tesla likely also invented lasers and wireless communication and forerunners of radio and TV. For his work he even got honorary degrees from both Columbia and Yale in the span of a few weeks. But his reputation was damaged by multiple lawsuits against him, mostly about patents. He won quite a few of them, but it took a long time, and colleagues of his that were more business heavy got into positions where they could quietly omit him from history. Coupled with his inability to complete a lot of his projects, he was less well known than he should have been until the car manufacturer took his name in 2003. There's debate over whether Tesla was chaste or maybe gay. He did once say that inventors should never marry, and he never did, but he might have had an affair with one of his friend's wives. Because he never paid his rent, a hotel where he stayed wanted some collateral. Tesla gave them a box that, according to him, contained a prototype of his death ray, worth $10,000. This became an object of great interest for the US government after Tesla's death in 1943, because they feared the death ray, or the plans for it, could fall into communist hands through Tesla's nephew. But when the box was opened, it turned out to be empty. What do you think? Was Tesla a cool guy? He was certainly an eccentric megalomaniac with a habit of not finishing his progress, but he was also a genius inventor and a great showman. The worst thing about him was probably the company he kept in his later years, and he never did that kickflip I mentioned at the very beginning. Now of course, skateboards weren't invented yet when Tesla lived, but he was an inventor. Why didn't he just invent the skateboard and then do a kickflip? With that in mind, I'm gonna say cool guy but on parole. Don't not invent the skateboard again. And that's it. If you have ideas whose coolness I should investigate next, let me know in the comments. Also, I got most of this stuff from one of Tesla's biographies, but I'm no historian, so if you have important info pertaining to Tesla's coolness, let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching, don't forget to like and subscribe, bye!